The 7,211th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda of this meeting is non-proliferation. The agenda is adopted. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. At this meeting, the Security Council will hear a briefing by Ambassador Gary Quinlan, Permanent Representative of Australia, in his capacity as Chair of the Security Council Committee established pursuant to Resolution 1737 of 2006. I now give the floor to Ambassador Gary Quinlan. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honour to present the report of the committee established pursuant to Resolution 1737 in accordance with paragraph 18H of the same resolution. The present report covers the period from 20 March to 24 June 2014, during which time the committee held one informal meeting, two informal meetings, and conducted additional work using the no objection procedure envisaged by paragraph 15 of the guidelines for the conduct of the committee's work. I'd like to start with the final report of the panel of experts' current mandate. The Council received the report on 9 June and it's now available in all UN languages under document number S/2014/394. As always, the report includes observations that Member States may find useful guidance in implementing the measures in Resolutions 1737, 1747, 1803 and 1929, and I remind all delegates of the importance of conveying the report to your relevant sanctions implementation authorities back home. The committee itself had the opportunity to discuss the report with the panel on the 2nd of June, as required by paragraph 2 of Resolution 2105, and will consider whether any follow-up action by the committee is necessary, taking into account the report's conclusions. In its report, the panel again notes that some states have indicated to the panel a degree of uncertainty as to whether Security Council resolutions concerning Iran remain fully in force as negotiations between the P5+1 and Iran enter a critical stage. I should emphasise once again that only the Security Council itself can alter the sanctions measures applied by the Council. Until there is a new resolution of the Council on this issue, the measures in Resolutions 1737, 1747, 1803 and 1929 remain in full effect. The committee stands ready to provide guidance to Member States on the application of the Council's measures to any transaction and urges Member States to report to the committee any transaction they believe contravenes the measures. In this vein, I would like to advise the Council that the committee received a report from a Member State during the current reporting period. We received this on 31 March, of the interdiction in the Red Sea by its naval forces of a cargo of conventional arms, including rockets, mortars and ammunition, which were allegedly loaded onto a vessel in the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. The panel of experts, under the direction of the committee, carried out inspections of the seized arms on 28 and 29 April, and on 16 June, the panel submitted its report to the committee. The committee met this week on 23 June to discuss this report with the panel and is now considering its response to this report. Similarly, the committee wrote to Iran on 27 March in relation to a carbon fibre interdiction, which I've referred to in my two previous reports, seeking Iran's comments. Regrettably, Iran has not yet provided a response. On a happier note, cooperation between relevant Security Council sanctions committees, such as the 1737 Committee, with the Financial Action Task Force has continued. You'll recall that on 18 November last year, the chairs of 6 Security Council committees and the President of FATF held a joint open briefing to the UN membership. On 30 April this year, the FATF President wrote to inform me that he had organised a meeting for 22nd June between the FATF and financial experts from the sanctions experts groups, including the Iran panel of experts. Thank you, Mr. President.
I'd like to thank Ambassador Quinlan for his briefing. I would now like to give the floor to those of council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the 1737 Committee, under the chairmanship of Ambassador Gary Quinlan, as well as a panel of experts for their continued work in supporting implementation of the Security Council's resolutions on Iran. The E3+3 in Iran have reached a critical point in the negotiations on a comprehensive agreement on Iran's nuclear program. With less than a month to go before the interim deal is due to expire on 20 July, it is crucial that Iran understands it must address the concerns of the international community for a deal to be possible and for sanctions imposed as a result of Iran's nuclear program to be lifted. The E3+3 are strongly committed to agreement on a comprehensive solution before 20 July. Several rounds of talks on a comprehensive agreement have been held in Vienna, the latest just last week. We have now entered the drafting and negotiating phase. Whilst discussions have been frank and the atmosphere positive, gaps between the two sides remain. In parallel to these negotiations on a comprehensive agreement, the United States and European Union have been delivering the sanctions relief set out in the Geneva Interim Agreement. We welcome the latest IAEA report of 23 May, which notes that Iran has continued to implement the nuclear measures agreed under the Joint Plan of Action. The E3+3 recognise the importance of working with the UN once a deal is agreed to ensure the appropriate UN Security Council framework is in place to support implementation of the agreement. But, echoing the point just made by the chair of the 1737 Committee, while negotiations continue, the bulk of sanctions must remain in place, including all UN sanctions. States should be in no doubt that all of the UN Security Council resolutions on Iran remain fully in force. We should continue to implement and enforce those sanctions robustly. The economic pressure that sanctions create is a peaceful incentive and supports a diplomatic effort to reach a comprehensive solution. Mr. President, turning to the work of the committee, we are concerned by breaches and possible breaches by Iran of its international obligations. The interdiction of a vessel carrying a cargo of conventional arms in the Red Sea is deeply worrying. The arms, including rockets, mortars and ammunition, were allegedly loaded onto the vessel in the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. The panel of experts, after a thorough investigation, concluded that this shipment was a violation of Iran's obligations under Resolution 1747. This is yet another example of an illicit arms transfer in the region involving Iran. We look forward to the committee discussing this serious matter further and to its firm action in response. The 90-day report also highlights that Iran failed to respond to requests for information relating to a carbon fiber interdiction. This follows Iran's failure to respond to requests for information on ballistic missile launches last year and on an intercepted arms shipment to Yemen. Iran's ongoing failure to respond is regrettable. We call on Iran to engage in earnest with the committee on such incidents. Mr. President, the United Kingdom is committed to finding a peaceful negotiated solution on the nuclear issue. The ongoing discussions on a comprehensive agreement are the best opportunity in recent years for resolution of the nuclear issue. We will continue to make every effort to find a comprehensive settlement, and we look to Iran to do the same. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the representative of the United Kingdom, and I would now like to give the floor to the representative of Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. I would like to thank the chairperson of the committee for his valuable briefing as well as for leading the proceedings of the committee. We wish also to thank the group of experts for their high-quality reports. Jordan welcomes the efforts deployed by the committee in assisting international organizations and states in matters relating to the implementation of relevant resolutions on sanctions against Iran through responding to the queries of states on the technical matters about the speedy implementation of resolutions, and stating that Security Council resolutions on Iran are still enjoying the same legal authority despite the negotiations currently underway on the nuclear file of Iran. We encourage the committee to continue its investigation on the breaches committed by Iran, as well as contacting the Iranian government as a first step to settle the pending matters on the breaches, particularly those relating to the weaponry shipment seized on board at the Red Sea, which constitutes a clear-cut violation of Iran of paragraph 5 of Resolution 1747. In addition to the incident on the carbon fibers that was seized in Singapore on the way to Iran. Jordan calls upon the committee to continue cooperation with the other sanctions committee to benefit from their expertise. Jordan welcomes the efforts made to arrive at a final agreement between Iran on the one hand and the permanent members of Security Council and Germany on the other. We, at the same time, encourage the committee to continue undertaking its tasks comprehensively and fully. Thank you, Mr. President. شكرا السيد الممثل.
Mr. President, I wish to thank Ambassador Quinlan for his briefing and commend him for his great efforts in promoting the work of 1737 Committee. China always attaches great importance to the work of the committee and will continue to work with the chair of the committee and relevant parties so that its work will be carried out in a balanced, orderly, and steady manner. China always believes that all parties have obligations to implement sanctions resolution against Iran earnestly, accurately, and comprehensively. However, sanction itself is not an end. The committee and the Security Council should both work to help to find a diplomatic solution. We hope the committee will continue to, according to its mandate and principles of objectivity, impartiality, and pragmatism, based on clear facts, solid evidence, and full consultations, appropriately deal with suspected non-compliance. China will continue with such principles and actively participate in committee's work in a responsible manner. Mr. President, China commends the positive trend in recent diplomatic efforts to solve Iran's nuclear program, appreciate the fact that IAEA maintains consultations with Iran to clarify outstanding nuclear issues so as to reach agreement on relevant measures. Currently, the comprehensive agreement negotiations has entered a critical stage. At the recently wrapped up fifth round of the talk, 6 countries and Iran had intensive negotiations on draft of the final agreement and achieved certain progress. A draft joint comprehensive plan of action has been proposed on the basis of the Great Test. Although parties should still have many differences towards the draft test, the goal of the negotiations is to narrow the differences. China hopes that all parties will cooperate on the basis of equality and mutual respect, accommodate each other's concerns so as to push forward the negotiation process. Parties should remain flexible and pragmatic in order to find a solution. Early resolution of the nuclear question in Iran is conducive to safeguarding the international nuclear non-proliferation regime and the peace and stability of the Middle East, which is beneficial to the entire international community. China stands ready to work with all parties, as always, to make active efforts to reach a comprehensive agreement that is fair, balanced, mutually beneficial, and win-win results-based, so as to play a constructive role in finding a comprehensive, long-term, and appropriate solution to the question of Iran. Thank you.
I'd like to thank China for his statement, and I give the floor to France.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Ambassador Gary Quinlan also for presenting the 3-month report on the committee activities and for all the work he's done with his team at the head of the 1737 committee. The flight forward of the Iranian nuclear program for over a decade has been the subject of deep concern in the international community. The uncertainty about the exclusively peaceful purposes of this program and the refusal of Iran to engage in dialogue have led the Council to establish a sanctions regime. However, we've always kept the door to dialogue open. The adoption of the Joint Action Plan last November 24th, which achieved a suspension by Iran for 6 months of the most sensitive activities of its nuclear program, have made it possible to turn a new page in discussions between the Group of Six and Tehran. These discussions will resume on July 2 in Vienna and should continue until the date set by the Joint Action Plan, in other words, July 20th. Until now, the negotiation has been difficult. The positions of the Group of Six and Iran are still at a distance from each other on several essential areas of the discussion. With our partners of the E3+3 group, but we are determined to reach a long-term solution which will make it possible to guarantee and establish the exclusively peaceful purposes of the Iranian nuclear program. But in order to do so, Iran must commit itself to take technical measures to assure the international community that it will not seek to provide itself with a nuclear weapon in the future. Furthermore, it is indispensable for Iran to enter a productive dialogue with the International Atomic Energy Agency on the possible military past and present dimension of its nuclear program. The scant progress made on the stage must be followed by specific gestures by Iranians. The resolution of all these pending questions with the IAEA is essential in order to reach a long-term solution. Mr. President, I also wish to recall here that Security Council resolutions on Iran are still in full force in the expectation of a global settlement of the proliferation crisis. The Joint Action Plan specifically states this. It is thus with concern that we have noted the conclusions of the investigation of the panel of experts of the Committee on the Interception of the Plus C vessel by Israeli authorities. This report confirms that the transfer of missiles, which are possibly Syrian, and ammunition was a clear embargo of violation of the arms embargo decided on by Resolution 1747 of the Security Council. This incident is of concern in several respects. Not only does it confirm that arms from Iran continue to be distributed throughout the Middle East and feed the spiral of violence in the region, but also it calls into question Iran's good faith in its expressed will to respond to the Security Council's concerns. It is now up to the 1737 Committee to take the appropriate measures to respond to this incident. A first useful response would be to convey to Member States the lessons which the Committee might draw from this violation. Finally, we welcome the publication of the final report of the experts. This document is a precious source of information on the illicit programs of Iran and the means Tehran has used to circumvent sanctions. It also proposes simple operational recommendations which the Committee must implement. Finally, we hope that all member states of the United Nations will be able to see this final report and use it to improve as much as possible the implementations of Security Council resolutions on Iran. Thank you, sir.
I'd like to thank the representative of France for a statement, and I give the floor to Chile. Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, we would like to thank Ambassador Quinlan for presenting the quarterly report of the work of the Committee of the Security Council established under Resolution 1737. We value the work that he's been carrying out at the head of this committee. Between the 2nd and 4th of April, the group of experts of the 1737 Committee visited the cities of Santiago and Valparaiso in Chile, where they were able to observe directly the way in which my country implements and complies with this and other United Nations sanctions regime. While we accompanied the group of experts during these visits, we heard more than once queries regarding the status of sanctions of the multilateral system. in line with what can be read in the final report of the group of experts distributed on 11th of June. Such queries have been repeated in different interviews and meetings. Now, this clearly points to the fact that both in the private sector as in the public sector, there have been great expectations as well as confusion with regard to a possible broad agreement between the P5+1 and Iran on the Iranian nuclear program. This is a new context for the work of the committee, and we consider that this work needs to be dealt with. We hope that among the members of the committee there's an attempt to reach a consensus and move forward at least on recommendation number 1 of the final report of the group of experts, referring to the guidelines on the status of sanctions of the Security Council with regard to Iran. Mr. President, Chile supports diplomatic efforts that promote dialogue and a peaceful solution of disputes. As we have already stated in other opportunities, our country is following with great interest the current negotiations underway, although we have maintained a cautious approach. This attitude is based on cases such as a Clause C, which is currently considered by the committee and which, in accordance with the agreement collected, would seem to be a violation of operative paragraph 5 of Resolution 1747. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the representative of Chile for his statement. I would now like to give the floor to Lithuania.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Ambassador Gary Quinlan for his 90-day briefing on the work of the Security Council Committee on Iran. I would like also to commend the committee and its panel of experts for their important work. Lithuania strongly believes in the need of a comprehensive, negotiated and long-term solution which would build international confidence in the exclusive, peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program and full compliance with international obligations. Lithuania welcomes progress achieved in the implementation of the joint plan of action by E3+3 and Iran of November 24th last year. It is encouraging that the talks have now moved into a drafting phase. We encourage Iran to engage constructively with E3+3 in resolving all outstanding issues, including those related to the possible undisclosed military dimension to the nuclear program. We also welcome the continuing cooperation of Iran and IAEA under the framework for cooperation. It is encouraging that the agency could confirm the implementation by Iran of 6 initial and 7 subsequent practical measures, as well as the agreement on further 5 practical measures. The provision of design and other relevant information, as well as access to various facilities, is an essential element in helping the agency to build a clearer picture of Iran's nuclear program. Pending a comprehensive solution, all Council sanctions imposed on Iraq remain in effect. Both Iran and member states, as well as the nationals and entities, are obliged to fully implement relevant Council measures before work of both the committee and the panel of experts in verifying compliance should remain unaffected. We welcome the final report of the panel of experts and its swift public release. We are particularly pleased with the panel's in-depth analysis of methods used for sanctions evasion and the financing of prohibited activities. The report also contains sensible recommendations that should be addressed by the committee without delay. It is important to note that the majority of incidents investigated by the panel of experts were related with items that fall below the established control thresholds. This underscores the need for guidance to member states on the implementation of the catch-all clause. We see merit in adopting the implementation assistance notice in this regard, as recommended by the panel of experts last year. We remain concerned, however, about the disturbing pattern of conventional arms embargo violations, with persistent report of arms transfers to Syria and elsewhere. The panel's final report rightly points out that actions of Iran on conventional arms stand in clear contrast to apparent restraint in areas related to the nuclear program. The latest case discussed at the committee that involves attempted transfer from Iran of containers with concealed rockets, mortars, and related material on a vessel Clause C was another clear violation of Iran's obligations to comply with arms embargo. It merits an appropriate response by the committee. Finally, let me reaffirm Lithuania's support to all efforts geared at finding a comprehensive solution to Iran's nuclear issue that would be the basis for building international confidence in an exclusively peaceful nature of its nuclear program. We reiterate our hope that Iran's engagement with E3+3 talks would also translate in cooperation with the committee. I thank you, Mr. President.
I'd like to thank the representative of Lithuania for his statement, and I give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, President. I would like to thank you, Ambassador Quinlan, for your briefing and your leadership of the committee. We appreciate your efforts and those of the committee to ensure that the committee remains active in carrying out its important mandate. The Council meets at a time of P5+1 talks on Iran's nuclear program. I would like to touch briefly on those talks and also discuss the importance of sanctions implementation and the recent seizure of arms aboard the vessel Class C. Mr. President, the P5+1 countries remain united in their determination to resolve international community concerns about the Iranian nuclear program and to bring Iran into compliance with Security Council resolutions. The P5+1 is now in an active and intense diplomatic effort to reach a settlement with Iran. Such an outcome must achieve our goals of preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and ensuring that Iran's nuclear program is entirely peaceful. But for now, in the absence of such an agreement, all UN Security Council imposed sanctions remain fully in effect. The mandates of the Security Council's Iran Sanctions Committee and the panel of experts remain unchanged. During this period of negotiations, the work of the committee and the panel has played and will continue to play a role supporting international diplomatic efforts. We therefore urge the committee to continue carrying out its important functions. The committee should be continuously taking steps to improve enforcement of the UN sanctions and respond effectively to violations. In this vein, the United States welcomes the 2014 final report of the panel of experts. We encourage all UN member states to review carefully the final report, which has just been posted on the committee's website. We urge the committee to take prompt action to implement the panel's recommendations to improve sanctions implementation. Implementing these recommendations could help states better understand and carry out their obligations to enforce those sanctions. The United States has long encouraged the committee to improve its response to willful violations of the sanctions. This leads me to my last point on the most egregious sanctions violation uncovered this year, the seizure of arms aboard the vessel Class C this past March. After an exhaustive investigation, the panel of experts documented the discovery on board the vessel of 40 M302 rockets, 181 mortar shells, and approximately 400,000 pieces of ammunition. Based on information from the panel, we know that the shipment originated in Iran and therefore constituted a clear violation of Security Council Resolution 1747. The Class C incident is another example of Iranian attempts to smuggle arms to extremists. These repeated and intentional violations of Resolution 1747 are extremely troubling, as they undermine both regional security and the credibility of this council. We look forward to working with other committee members to respond to this incident and to work continuously to improve the enforcement of the resolutions of this council. Thank you, Mr. President.
I'd like to thank the United States for your statement, and I would now like to give the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Ambassador Gary Quinlan for his briefing on the work of the 1737 Committee. We greatly appreciate his able leadership and the robust activities of the panel of experts, including the submission of this year's final reports. Let me begin by reiterating my government's support for the ongoing efforts between the P5+1 and Iran, as well as the IAEA and Iran, to resolve the Iranian nuclear issue once and for all. In this regard, we welcome the progress on the implementation of the agreed measures and I look forward to the conclusion of a comprehensive plan of action soon. We also underline that Iran should faithfully cooperate with the P5+1 and the IAEA, as well as the broader international community, to resolve present and past issues, including all aspects of the possible military dimensions of its nuclear program. Nonetheless, as emphasized once again by the chair of the 1737 Committee, we would like to stress that the measures and obligations under relevant Security Council resolutions remain in effect until there is a new superseding resolution by this Council on this issue. In this regard, the final report submitted by the panel of experts deserves particular attention. It provides clear rationale for us to remain vigilant against continued activities prohibited under relevant resolutions. All member states should heed the recommendations of the report, such as being allowed against risks involved with the diversion of dual-use goods as well as proliferation financing. The recent interdiction in the Red Sea of a large load of conventional arms, including rockets, and the subsequent findings in the panel's inspection report on 16 June demonstrate the need for such continued vigilance. It is crucial for the 1737 Committee to actively follow up on the report and take timely and effective actions in response to the violation. We also appreciate the 1737 Committee's ongoing cooperation with the Financial Action Task Force and expect further synergy between the committee and other relevant committees, as well as international and regional organizations. Finally, I would like to join others in urging Iran to fully cooperate with the 1737 Committee and to respond in a satisfactory manner to the committee's inquiries, including on the carbon fiber case and other pending issues. Such cooperation is indeed crucial to move us all forward. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for his statement, and I would now like to give the floor to Luxembourg.
Mr. President, I in turn would like to thank Ambassador Gary Quinlan for his briefing, as well as the commitment that he has shown on the head of his team as the chair of the committee pursuant to Resolution 1737. The committee's work is of the greatest importance. Luxembourg expresses its appreciation to the panel of independent experts created by Resolution 1929 for the valuable support they give to the work of the 1737 Committee. We thank them for their excellent final report, which is well documented and methodologically rigorous, and has just been presented to us. The publication of this document will be of great usefulness to member states. They will find it full of useful information on the various kinds of attempts to circumvent the sanctions regime. Luxembourg supports the recommendations in the final report of the group of experts and calls for their effective implementation. With the adoption of the Joint Action Plan last November 24th in Geneva, and the beginning of its implementation on January 20th of this year, two milestones were passed. First, it was demonstrated that the principle of the two-track approach, combining openness to dialogue and the adoption of restrictive measures, bears fruit when it is consistently applied. It was then confirmed that even the most complex cases are not carved in stone, and no level of distrust is insurmountable for negotiations to take place in good faith. The Joint Action Plan agreed upon in Geneva, despite its importance, is only an intermediate phase along the road which should lead to a complete, negotiated and lasting solution of the Iranian nuclear dossier. We in turn wish to welcome the efforts made by the group of the 3+3 under the leadership of the High Representative of the European Union, Catherine Ashton, in order to negotiate a global agreement with Iran which will establish confidence in the exclusively peaceful nature of the Iranian nuclear program. For we should recall that the challenge here is not to speak to Iran's right to civilian use of nuclear energy. This right is not questioned. What we are trying to do is ensure that the exercise of this right will be done in full transparency, in close cooperation with the IAEA, and with respect for all obligations derived from the international obligations of Iran. In the expectation of a final agreement, as other speakers have mentioned before me, the sanctions regime established by the Security Council must be fully applied. Member States and other terms must continue to exercise the same vigilance as in the past. This is what we were just reminded of by the Class C episode. The vessel was intercepted in the Red Sea last March, was carrying a cargo of arms that had been loaded in the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. This episode, which the panel of experts concluded was a violation of the sanctions regime, demonstrates that Iran continues to flout its international obligations, even when it is engaged in negotiations in order to re-establish the confidence of the international community in it. We deplore this fresh violation of the sanctions regime, which is not in agreement with Iran's expressed will to reassure its international partners as to the peaceful nature of its intentions. Furthermore, we find it encouraging that the latest report of the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, dated May 23rd, confirms that Iran began a substantive dialogue with the agency in order to clarify the pending questions linked to the possible military dimension of its nuclear program. We are also encouraged by the fact that the IAEA's report confirms that Iran is continuing to take measures with regard to its nuclear program in accordance with the agreements made with the 3+3 and the Joint Plan of Action. In conclusion, I wish to reaffirm the full support to the diplomatic efforts currently ongoing in Vienna. We hope that these negotiations will lead to the desired result within the expected timeline. We also express the hope that success in the case of Iran will, when the time comes, have a favorable influence on the development of other non-proliferation cases. Thank you, sir.
I'd like to thank Luxembourg for your statement, and I would now like to give the floor to the representative of Chad. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to thank the Chairman of the Committee of the Group of Experts established under Resolution 1737, 2006, His Excellency Ambassador Gary Quinlan of Australia, for this very detailed quarterly report on the activities of this committee for the period from 20 March to 20 June of 2014. Chad takes due note of the report of the group of experts established under Resolution 1929, establishing the group of experts and the recommendations contained in the report. We encourage the members of the committee to continue their discussions on these recommendations. We also take note of the efforts that rapprochement between Iran and the IAEA, and we welcome the bilateral discussions between Iran and certain countries, as well as the holding of 2 rounds of high-level negotiations from the 14th and 16th of May, and from the 16th and 20th of June in Vienna, in the framework of the Joint Plan of Action between Iran and the group P5+1, aimed at reaching a final agreement on the Tehran nuclear program by 20th of July 2014. Nevertheless, there are constant violations by Iran, and Chad deplores these violations. Iran's partners are at a crucial phase in their negotiations, and we hope that they will reach a negotiated settlement of their dispute for the good of peace and security around the world. To conclude, Mr. President, we need to recognize that sanctions need to evolve to reflect the situation on the ground. This is why we think that there should be an alleviation of sanctions to bring the Iranians to the negotiating table. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Chad for your statement, and I now give the floor to Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the chair of the 1737 Committee, His Excellency Gary Quinlan, for his presentation of the 90-day report of the committee. I also commend him for his astute leadership of the committee and the panel of experts for their hard work. We have carefully read the report of the panel of experts and take note of their assessment that a comprehensive solution to the negotiations between Iran and the E3+3 is within reach. The observation of the IAEA that Iran has fulfilled its voluntary measures agreed to under the Joint Plan of Action is significant. We also note from the report of the panel of experts that there is a degree of uncertainty on the part of states concerning the status of obligations regarding procurements related to uranium enrichment by Iran. There is also the challenge of identifying dual-use items that fall below established control thresholds. The report indicates that it is increasingly difficult for states to identify links between below-threshold items and prohibited end users or end users in Iran. The report attributes this to more sophisticated procurement strategies on the part of Iran, which allows it to conceal procurement. This situation calls for more clarity on below-threshold items, and we urge the committee to look into this with a view to providing guidance to states. On a positive note, we welcome the assessment by several states that there has been a decrease in the number of detected attempts by Iran to procure items for prohibited programs since mid-2013. The panel of experts believes that this may reflect the new political environment in Iran, as well as progress in the negotiations with the E3+3. We shall continue to monitor the situation as we look forward to a successful conclusion of the negotiations within the agreed deadline on the 20th of July set by the Joint Plan of Action. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Nigeria, and I'd like to give the floor to Rwanda.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also thank Mr. Chair for your briefing and your leadership at the helm of this committee. Rwanda continues to support the ongoing negotiation talks between Iran and the P5+1. We take note of the start of negotiation in the final nuclear deal. It is unfortunate that there were reports of excessive demands in the round of talks that ended on June 20th, which slowed the process. We hope that negotiators will use this break to rally the terms and come back on July 2nd with realistic demands that will lead to a common text by July 20th as scheduled. The role of the 1737 Committee in support of the P5+1 process is vital to its success. We agree with the Chair that only the Security Council itself can alter the sanction measures applied by the Council. We acknowledge that the opportunity presented by the P5+1 talks toward achieving the objective of the committee. That is why we should not hesitate to take action that will facilitate the success of the ongoing talk. Mr. President, the reported arms embargo violation by Iran on March 31st concerning the Kursi is unfortunate. We urge Iran to desist from any activity that might violate the decision of the Council. Recalling the last and today briefing by the Chair, it was mentioned that the committee had on several occasions continued to seek Iran's comment regarding the carbon fiber prohibition, and to date is yet to receive a response. We strongly encourage Iran to cooperate and engage with the committee on this or any future queries. Similarly, we take note of Iran's compliance with the regulation of the IAEA and commend the transparency measures undertaken in this matter as per the IAEA report of 23rd May. Iran continues to implement its commitment under the November 2013 Joint Plan of Action. In the same line, the cooperation provides positive momentum as Iran and P5+1 attempt to reach a comprehensive agreement. Taken together, we remain hopeful that Iran's action on the Joint Plan of Action and the November 11 agreement with the IAEA are encouraging signs of the willingness of Iran to be more transparent about its nuclear activities in the areas of proliferation concern. Finally, Mr. President, Rwanda always believes that a diplomatic solution is the only way to resolve the bottleneck over Iran's nuclear program. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Rwanda for your statement, and I give the floor to Argentina.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Through you, I wish to begin by thanking Ambassador Quinlan for presenting the three-month report on the work of the Security Council Committee established pursuant to Resolution 1737 and its dedicated work at the head of this subsidiary body. Mr. President, as Ambassador Quinlan said in his report, and the previous one in March, the sanctions the Security Council imposed continue to be enforced and must be applied by member states. On behalf of my delegation in this regard, I wish to thank the panel of experts for their final report. We hope that the committee will continue considering the recommendations made by the panel of experts and will be able to reach an agreement in this regard. Mr. President, each time that the Security Council considers the three-month report on the work of the committee, we receive the report of the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. On the application of the Safeguards Agreement with regard to the Non-proliferation Treaty in Iran, and in this case, we feel it relevant to highlight that the report recognizes that Iran has applied the 7 measures agreed with the agency in February of this year. In the framework of the cooperation it has with the IAEA, and that the agency is studying the information received. We also believe it is suspicious that the agency and Iran have agreed upon the 5 following measures to be applied before August 25 of this year. In addition, we find it encouraging that the report also recognizes that Iran has complied with the measures of the Joint Action Plan agreed upon with the P5+1. Like other members of the international community, we closely follow the development of these negotiations. For this reason, although we are encouraged by the goodwill demonstrated by all parties, we hope that a final agreement can be reached within the deadline established. As we said at this Council in March and another forum, we are pleased that the IAEA continues the monitoring and verification activities on nuclear energy as part of the application of the Joint Action Plan. We are convinced of the importance that the agency should have the facilities and necessary resources in order to effectively do its work. Mr. President, as I mentioned, we welcome the progress in negotiations, and we note the report of the Director General of the IAEA, which concludes that Iran's cooperation is assisting the agency to better understand its nuclear program. In this vein, we continue to believe that it is essential for Iran to actively cooperate with the organization, or rather the agency, in all pending issues, and to comply with its obligations, including this Council's resolution. Thank you, sir.
I'd like to thank the representative of Argentina for his statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as a representative of the Russian Federation. Distinguished colleagues, we are grateful to Ambassador Gary Quinlan for the briefing on the work of the committee heads over the reporting period. The experts submitted a final report and 3 reports on incidents. We'd like to share our preliminary impressions on the reports related to incidents. The Russian delegation has already expressed our position at previous meetings of the committee. Our position on the conclusions contained in it, as well as the proposal to work an implementation note on the results of an incident of the interdiction on the Red Sea of the ship Post Sea, we will make known later after a comprehensive examination of the documents. It's enough to say that any external activity of the committee at this current extremely sensitive phase of the negotiation process on the Iranian nuclear program is not very timely, especially with regard to such a complex case as smuggling of weapons, where accusations against Iran are based mainly on indirect evidence. With regard to the final report, we would like to once again note that in the conclusions and assessments of the experts, they need to be very careful. Any information not backed up by concrete facts with regard to possible violations of the sanctions regime could have a negative impact on the conduct of negotiations of the Group of Six and Iran and its cooperation with the IAEA, and should not be included in the report. We also have some questions about recommendations of the Group of Experts, in particular about the part of more active cooperation with FAC in regard to the implementation of the Iranian sanctions regime. The Security Council should not impose on countries the establishment of this mechanism or determine the modalities of its work. The provision by states of additional information that is not mandatory under the resolutions of the Security Council of the UN, whether to the committee or to the Group of Experts or to other international organizations or mechanisms or on a bilateral basis, can only be done on a voluntary basis. All accountability requirements are prescribed in resolutions of the Security Council. We have more than once drawn attention to the fact that the practice of clarification that seek to interpret is unacceptable. We'd also like to touch upon the issue of certain initiatives that have been put forward in furtherance of the recommendations of the Group of Experts in the final report. First of all, we would like to underscore that using these conclusions is inadmissible until there's substantive discussion in the committee. This pertains first and foremost to contacts of representatives of the group with other bodies mentioned in the report, such as FAC. Secondly, we do not support considering the issue of the possibility of joint meetings of the Security Council Committee 1737 and 1718. While it's very important to have an exchange of experience between the subsidiary bodies of the Security Council, we do consider that the sanctions regime of the Security Council on Iran and the DPRK are different both in their essence and in their political background. With regard to considerations of experts on the future of the sanctions regime, after reaching a comprehensive settlement of the situation regarding the Iranian nuclear program, this is an issue that is outside their mandate. The group should not interfere in this extremely sensitive process, and in particular, it is unacceptable to prejudge its outcome. Distinguished colleagues, Russian diplomacy over many years has been actively working in the interest of achieving a just settlement on the Iranian nuclear program. The basis of the principles of step-by-step approach and reciprocity set out by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov. In this connection, we welcome the voting in Vienna from 16th to 20th of June at another full round of negotiations with the Group of Six and Iran. It was very useful and confirmed the overall readiness to continue cooperating in a constructive vein and to hold detailed discussions. The sides proceeded to start working directly on a text of future agreements. This work will be continued during the next negotiation round from July 2 to the 15th in Vienna. We will continue to do everything that we can to achieve a final comprehensive resolution of all issues related to the Iranian nuclear program and lifting of sanctions against Iran that were introduced by the corresponding resolutions of the Security Council of the UN. Now, I would resume my functions as President of the Council. The Security Council has thus concluded the present stage of its consideration of the item on its agenda. Meeting is adjourned.